What is the meaning of life? It's a question that refuses to go away. It haunts us in quiet moments, confronts us during crisis, and challenges us when everything seems fine but still feels incomplete. Human beings are not just creatures that eat, sleep, and survive. We reflect, we wonder, we search. From the time of ancient myths to modern podcasts, we've been on a never-ending quest to understand why we're here. Yet the more we look for the answer, the more elusive it becomes. Traditional religion once offered answers, God's plan, divine purpose, heaven and hell. But in the modern age, especially after the wars, revolution, and the rise of science, many people began to doubt these narratives. In the ruins of certainty, existentialism emerged, not to provide new answers, but to confront the emptiness with honesty. Existentialism isn't a single philosophy or a set of rules. It's a perspective, a lens through which to view the human condition. It doesn't tell you what to think. Instead, it forces you to face uncomfortable truths. The world might be meaningless, and it's up to you to find your way anyway. The movement began to take shape in the 19th century, with Søren Kierkegaard, often considered the first existentialist. His work was rooted in Christianity, but not the comfortable kind. Kierkegaard believed that true faith required a leap, a personal, passionate commitment in the face of uncertainty. He saw despair as the sickness of the soul, the pain of not becoming your true self. For him, life's meaning wasn't something handed down. It had to be chosen, and chosen again, even when it made no logical sense. This was not just a religious view, but a psychological and existential one. You become who you are through your choices. Then came Friedrich Nietzsche. If Kierkegaard invited us to believe despite the void, Nietzsche asked us to stare into that void and laugh. Famously, he wrote, "God is dead." But Nietzsche didn't celebrate this death. He mourned it. Without the anchor of divine meaning, he feared people would fall into nihilism, a belief in nothing. But Nietzsche didn't stop there. Instead, he challenged us to overcome it. He introduced the idea of the Übermensch, the overman or higher person, who creates values instead of obeying old ones. Meaning, he argued, is not discovered, it's created. And it must be created boldly. You have to become the artist of your own life, turning chaos into form. He believed that life is suffering. Yes, but it can also be beautiful if you have the strength to affirm it all, even the pain. Jean-Paul Sartre took Nietzsche's rebellion and brought it into the 20th century. Sartre, an atheist, believed that existence precedes essence. In simpler terms, we are born without purpose, and we create that purpose through our actions. There is no blueprint for life, no divine plan, no inner destiny waiting to be unlocked. We are radically free, and that freedom can be terrifying. He called it anguish, the burden of knowing that we are responsible for every choice we make. But he also called it a gift, because in that freedom lies dignity. We are not puppets, we are not passengers. We are the authors of our lives. To live authentically, for Sartre, meant owning your choices, even when it's hard, even when others judge you. To live in bad faith, on the other hand, meant pretending we are not free, hiding behind roles and expectations. In Sartre's eyes, meaning is something we build, not find. Then came Albert Camus, the French-Algerian thinker who took existentialism in a different direction. For Camus, the absurd was the core of human experience. Imagine this: we long for clarity, truth, and purpose, but the universe responds with silence. That contradiction, between our deep hunger for meaning and the indifference of the cosmos, is what Camus called the absurd. So how should we live? Should we give up? No. Camus argued that the most human response is to rebel. Existentialism doesn't give us easy answers, but it gives us something else, a mirror. It forces us to look at ourselves, not as we wish we were, but as we are free, anxious, uncertain, and yet full of potential. In the modern world, where old traditions have faded and information floods our minds from every direction, the teachings of existentialist thinkers have become more relevant than ever. We live in a time when we are told, you can be anything, do anything, choose your own path. At first, this sounds liberating, but for many, this endless freedom leads not to joy, but to confusion, paralysis, and anxiety. Jean-Paul Sartre captured this perfectly. When he said, "Man is condemned to be free," he didn't mean it as a celebration. He meant that freedom isn't just a gift, it's a burden. Because once there is no God, no ultimate authority, and no universal purpose, you are responsible for defining your life. No one can tell you what to do, and that means no one can take responsibility for your choices but you. This overwhelming sense of responsibility is part of what existentialists call angst, or existential anxiety ***. It's the unsettling feeling that beneath all our routines, titles, and identities, life doesn't come with built-in meaning. You might feel it when you look at a blank page, a job application, or an open road with no clear direction. It's the dizzying sense that anything is possible, but nothing is guaranteed. Soren Kierkegaard described this feeling in powerful terms. He saw anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. You can feel the pull, not to jump, but the awareness that you could. That's what freedom feels like. Terrifying and exhilarating all at once. For Kierkegaard, this wasn't something to avoid, but to embrace. Because through anxiety, we become aware of our responsibility to choose and to become ourselves. The modern world amplifies this anxiety. We are surrounded by choices: what to study, where to live, who to love, what to believe. Social media constantly compares our lives to others. Consumer culture tells us to find happiness through products. Algorithms try to define our tastes, predict our desires, and guide our every click. And yet, despite all this, we often feel more lost than ever. Existentialism cuts through the noise. It reminds us that no amount of external advice or cultural pressure can replace the hard work of self-definition. To live authentically means to make choices based on your inner truth, not just what's popular or expected. Sartre called this living in good faith. The opposite, living in bad faith, happens when we pretend we're not free, when we act like we're just a role, a student, a worker, a spouse, doing what's expected, not what we truly choose. But authenticity doesn't mean selfishness. It means courage. Courage to ask hard questions. Courage to stand by your choices, even when others don't understand. It means accepting that there will be no final proof you made the right decision, but choosing anyway. Albert Camus took this further. In the face of absurdity, he said, we must imagine a kind of joyful defiance. If life has no inherent meaning, we are free to create one. Camus' version of freedom isn't cold or nihilistic, it's deeply human. It means waking up each day and choosing to care, choosing to love, to fight, to create, even if the universe stays silent. This message resonates powerfully today. Many of us feel overwhelmed not by limits, but by possibilities. We are told we can do anything, yet we fear choosing the wrong path. We fear missing out, disappointing others, or wasting time. Existentialism answers this fear not with rules, but with honesty. It tells us, no one can live your life but you. There is no map, no guarantee, but there is freedom. The weight of this freedom may never go away, but maybe that's what makes life meaningful. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours. Existentialism often begins with the individual, the self, alone, facing the silence of the universe. But human beings do not live in isolation. We are social creatures, shaped by the people around us, by love and loss, by conflict and connection. So while the search for meaning may start in solitude, it cannot end there. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most influential existentialists, knew this well. In his famous work Being and Nothingness*, Sartre writes about the look, the moment when we realize that another person is watching us, judging us, seeing us not as we see ourselves, but from the outside. That realization is jarring. It reminds us that we are not the only authors of our identity. Others co-write our story, whether we want them to or not. This leads to what Sartre called the conflict of consciousness. You want to be free, to define yourself on your own terms. But the moment another person enters the room, you are no longer just you. You become an object in their eyes, a body, a face, a label. Sartre's famous line, "Hell is other people," is often misunderstood. He didn't mean that people are evil. He meant that being seen, truly seen, is uncomfortable. It exposes us. It forces us to confront the gap between how we see ourselves and how others see us. But Sartre wasn't saying we should reject others. On the contrary, he believed that meaning is incomplete without others. Freedom isn't just about doing whatever you want. It's about creating a world where others are free too. That brings us to Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre's lifelong partner, and a brilliant existentialist in her own right. De Beauvoir extended existentialism into the realm of gender, identity, and ethics. In her landmark book **The Second Sex**, she explored how women throughout history have been defined, not as full subjects, but as the other, the mirror in which men define themselves. She asked, how can someone find meaning if society denies their freedom from birth? Her answer was revolutionary. True freedom, she argued, must be shared. It's not enough to demand freedom for yourself while denying it to others. De Beauvoir saw human relationships as a balancing act between asserting your own subjectivity and respecting the subjectivity of others. This, she believed, is where meaning emerges, not in domination, but in mutual recognition. Albert Camus approached this theme from a slightly different angle. In his works, he often explored how love, friendship, and solidarity can offer warmth in an otherwise absurd world. While Camus believed that the universe has no inherent purpose, he didn't think this made human connection meaningless. In fact, it made it even more valuable, because if nothing is guaranteed, then every act of kindness, every shared moment, every relationship becomes an act of rebellion against despair. Camus once wrote, "If there is a sin against life, it consists perhaps not so much in despairing of life as in hoping for another life and eluding the implacable grandeur of this one. In other words, if this life is all we have, then our connections in this life are sacred." Existentialism also warns us about the danger of conformity. In our need to be accepted, we often lose ourselves. We play roles. We say what others want to hear. We wear masks. Martin Heidegger, another existential thinker, spoke about this in his concept of the they, the anonymous voice of society that tells us how to act, what to believe, who to be. The they whispers, "Don't be different. Don't ask too many questions. Just follow the crowd." Heidegger urged us to break free from that noise and live authentically, not as others expect us to, but as we truly are. Still, even Heidegger admitted that being authentic doesn't mean cutting ourselves off. It means bringing our true self into relationship with others. So where does that leave us in our search for meaning? It tells us that identity is not just something we find within. If existentialism begins with freedom and choice, it inevitably leads to something darker, something we all face but often try to avoid: suffering and death. These are the ultimate boundaries of human life, the walls we cannot climb, the silence we cannot outtalk. And yet, paradoxically, they are also the places where meaning can be most deeply explored. For the existentialist, suffering and death are not detours from life. They are part of its very structure. To live fully, we must confront them, not with denial but with honesty. Søren Kierkegaard was among the first philosophers to take suffering seriously, not as a problem to be solved, but as a condition to be understood. He believed that despair was not a failure, but a signal. When we despair, we are being pulled into a deeper awareness of ourselves. According to Kierkegaard, this despair often comes when we try to build our identity on things that can be taken away: success, relationships, social approval. When those things disappear, so does our sense of self. True selfhood, he argued, comes not from avoiding despair, but from passing through it, from standing in the fire and letting it burn away what is false, so that what remains is something more authentic, more lasting. For Kierkegaard, meaning begins when we dare to face the truth of our fragility. Friedrich Nietzsche also tackled suffering, but in his own radical way. He believed that suffering was not just something to endure, but something to transform. In his concept of *** amor fati, *** the love of fate, Nietzsche urged us not just to accept the hard parts of life, but to embrace them. Imagine looking back at your life and saying, "I would live it all over again." Exactly the same. That, to Nietzsche, was the mark of a life well lived. He famously said, What does not kill me makes me stronger. But this isn't about blind optimism. It's about turning pain into power, turning setbacks into fuel for growth. He saw suffering as the soil from which greatness can grow if we have the courage to endure it. Then there's Albert Camus, who looked suffering in the face and called it the absurd. Life, he said, is full of pain, and yet we search for meaning as if pain should not exist. This contradiction, the human desire for clarity in a world that offers none, is the heart of the absurd. Camus didn't try to explain away suffering. Instead, he asked how we can live in spite of it. His answer, revolt. Not a violent revolt, but a quiet, persistent defiance. He gave us the image of Sisyphus, endlessly pushing his boulder up the hill. The gods cursed him, but Camus imagined him smiling. Why? Because even in the face of pointless suffering, Sisyphus finds meaning in the struggle. He refuses to give up. In doing so, he becomes free. Existentialism doesn't romanticize death, but it does insist we take it seriously. Martin Heidegger believed that our awareness of death is what gives our life urgency. He called this being toward death the idea that we are not just living creatures, but dying ones. Every moment matters more precisely because it will end. To live authentically, according to Heidegger, means to live in the shadow of death, not to be paralyzed by fear, but to be awakened by it. Death strips away the illusion of endless time. It reveals what really matters. It forces us to ask, what am I doing with the life I have? In the modern world, we are surrounded by distractions that help us avoid this question. We scroll, we consume, we rush from one moment to the next. But existentialism tells us that meaning isn't found in escape. It's found in confrontation, in standing face to face with the reality that life is fragile and choosing to live fully anyway. That choice, that affirmation, is where meaning takes root. Suffering and death do not make life meaningless. In fact, for the existentialist, they are what make meaning possible. Without limits, life would have no urgency. Without pain, joy would lose its contrast. After walking through freedom, anxiety, identity, suffering, and death, we arrive at the question we started with. What is the meaning of life? Existentialism doesn't hand us a neatly packaged answer. It doesn't give us a fixed purpose, a divine rulebook, or a simple formula. Instead, it offers us something far more demanding and far more powerful. The invitation to choose. To live existentially is not to wait for meaning to appear, but to create it through the way we live. It is a way of being, a constant practice of honesty, courage, and self-definition in a world that often prefers comfort over truth. For existential thinkers, the meaning of life is not something we find out there. It is something we build in here, in our relationships, our passions, our struggles, and our moments of quiet decision. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that humans are condemned to be free. That phrase might sound harsh, but it reveals a key insight. No one else can live your life for you. No system, no ideology, no belief can make the choice for you. That's the burden of freedom, but also its beauty. You are not a copy. You are not a function. You are a being who chooses. And with every action, every word, every silence, you are shaping the meaning of your existence. Albert Camus took this further. In a universe that seems silent and indifferent, Camus did not surrender to despair. He chose rebellion, not the rebellion of destruction, but the rebellion of creation. He chose to live without illusions, to embrace the absurd and still say yes to life. In doing so, he turned existence into an act of artistic defiance. For Camus, to live well was not to escape suffering or invent false hope, but to stand tall in the face of meaninglessness and still love, still care, still create. That act, repeated daily, becomes its own kind of meaning. Simone de Beauvoir reminds us that meaning is not built in isolation. We are always in relation to others, to history, to systems that include or exclude us. A meaningful life, she argued, is not only a life of self-expression, but of shared freedom. If you build your life on the suppression or denial of someone else's freedom, your own freedom becomes false. De Beauvoir challenged us to ask not just, what is meaningful for me, but what kind of world am I helping to create? The great lesson of existentialism then is not that life has no meaning. It is that life has no asterisk given asterisk meaning. You are not born with a script. You are not here to fulfill a role. You are here to choose. And this choosing is not a one-time event. It happens every day, in the jobs we take, the people we love, the risks we avoid or embrace. Every choice is a brushstroke in the painting of our lives. And like any artist, we are free to create something ugly or beautiful, empty or profound. So how do we begin? By being honest with ourselves. By asking, what do I care about? What makes me come alive? What have I been avoiding? What masks am I wearing? These questions aren't easy. They take time. They might lead to discomfort, but they also lead to authenticity. And authenticity is where meaning begins. Not in the comfort of conformity, but in the tension of truth. In a world filled with noise, existentialism invites us to listen to the quiet call of our own existence, to stand alone when we must, to stand together when we can, to love knowing it won't last forever, to suffer knowing it may teach us more than joy ever could, to live knowing that death will come, and to do it all not because someone told us to, but because we chose it. That is the existential life. It is not a life of certainty, but it is a life of depth, a life of awareness, a life that, though it may never find a final answer, becomes meaningful simply because we chose to ask the question and dared to live in response to it. So the next time you find yourself asking, what is the meaning of life? Remember this, you are not waiting for the answer, you are living it.